Okay, I'm a huge fan of Scott's, which is awkward, and so this is my prep notes, which will be very strange. But I love seeing how the ratio changes a little. We get a little more diversity of gender in the room when Scott Galloway takes the stage. So thank you for bringing in the bros. Thank you. And they got to hear all about menopause and next pelvic health. So don't you motherfuckers leave. Don't leave. Don't leave. He said so. Okay, I have topics. I have a few. Okay, so we're going to start with you're more powerful than Vox. If anyone heard that, it was said once. The power of the person who has the following, who can fill the room, who writes, speaks, creates relationships, and props up other talent has changed dramatically. You kind of can become a producer, obviously, if you're of others. How do you think that the role of the individual media company of one is changing the landscape?
First off, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
They love you. You have a real cross section of people.
By the way, I think I was listening to the menopause panel. I wish when I was a senior in high school, I'm going to answer the question I want to answer.
No, you don't have to, actually. Exactly. I was like, fuck it, talk about menopause. It's better.
I think we need a class in adulting for seniors. And I wish, quite frankly, someone had taught me about menopause when I was a 17-year-old.
Yeah, he's lying. That's a lie.
I was raised by a single immigrant mother who lived and died as secretary. It was just me and her. And I remember menopause. I remember it now because I didn't know what was going on.
Did you know? Oh, you didn't know it was menopause. You saw behavior change.
We didn't use that word when I was growing up.
Yeah, we're just starting.
But anyways, I wish someone had kind of clued me in. I think we need a class on adulting, things like interest rate on your credit card. My son can do integers, but he doesn't understand that, okay, you realize you have to pay this back when you swipe your credit card. I think young men especially need a class on how to express romantic interest while making the other person feel safe. So I think we would really benefit from a class on adulting. I'm sorry, back to...
No, fuck that. We'll stay with that.
Okay.
Okay, you've also said that you think it's important for young men to have relationships, which I find interesting because not all relationships are super productive. I think you mean loving... pairing relationships at a young age, because for you it sounds like that created a circle of trust or a space that was safe. I think of my own teenage boy. I'm like, I'm not totally sure if he's ready for pussy. Like, I don't know. Like, is he? Why do you say that? Why do you say that it's?
I think young men especially need guardrails. Their prefrontal cortex, their decision making, their executive function doesn't catch up to a woman's until about the age of 25. So an 18-year-old boy and girl, the girl is competing against a 16-and-a-half-year-old girl. And young men just make bad decisions left to their own device. They're also more prone to addiction, more prone to self-harm, and they need guardrails. And there's a lot of wonderful guardrails. It's really important, I think, that men get involved in a boy's life. If you reverse engineer the single point of failure where a boy comes off the tracks, it's when he loses a male role model. There are 10 million single-family houses in the U.S. of the 80 million. They're 3 times as likely to be in poverty. 80% of those households are headed by a single mother. And what's interesting is that when it's a girl in the household, she has the same, and dad's gone, and 1 in 6 men have absolutely no contact with their kids after 3 years of divorce. The outcomes for the girl in a single-parent household are similar to dual-parent households. Same rates of college attendance, depression, self-harm. A boy becomes 3 times as likely to kill himself, 4 times as likely to be incarcerated. What it ends up is that while boys are physically stronger, they're emotionally and mentally weaker. And I just think there needs to be an acknowledgement that boys without male involvement really have poor outcomes. And just saying that 5 years ago, and things have gotten a lot better, got calls of, so you don't think mothers can play that role? Like,
Why is it different?
I think there's something about the physical size, the threat of physical size, the respect, the ability to I was out with a mother and her child because I'm coaching this kid, so she came along. And he's talking about, well, you're doing this. He kind of turns it back on her and attacks her. I can say, can you give me a minute? And I can say to the kid, fucking stop.
Yeah, that's interesting.
No one is going to want you to be more successful than your mother. Just fucking stop it.
Thank you. All the moms in the room, thank you.
And I can say that, and I think there's a greater chance he may not listen to me, but he's more likely to listen to me. Yeah. And what happens, there are a lot of communities now where there are just no men. Mm-hmm. And there's some really unusual dynamics, and that is, there are 3 times as many applicants by women to be a big sister in New York than there are men to be big brothers. And a lot of it is that there's this zeitgeist in our society, unfortunately, that Michael Jackson and the Catholic Church have fucked it up for all of us.
Right on. That
if you're a 30 or 35-year-old male, and maybe you don't have your own family, but you've got fraternal or paternal love to give or concern, if you get involved or express an interest in getting involved in, say, a 15-year-old boy's life, people are suspect of you. Mm-hmm. And we have to stop that. There's a lot of wonderful men out there that want to get involved or be helpful. When my parents split up, my mom was really good at getting men involved in my life. There was a neighbor down the hall. He swung by and said, me and my girlfriend are going horseback riding. Does Scott want to come with us? My mom tried to keep her boyfriends involved in my life. I had a stockbroker get involved in my life. I had coaches. I had a lot of men. And for a lot of boys, especially in the US, unfortunately, the first male role model they have is a prison guard. So the call out or the shout out would be to men. It's easy to think, oh, people would be suspicious of me, or I'm not a baller, I'm not hugely successful, I couldn't be a mentor to a boy or a young man. The wonderful things about boys is it's so easy to add value, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? What was the decision that led you to believe you should go to school without your shoes? Said Scott to his 14-year-old 3 days ago.
What is it with shoes, though? They won't wear them.
I'm coaching this 19-year-old kid, and he's like a sophomore in college, doing great. And he's like, I saw this film on Alaska. I think I'm just going to move to Alaska for a year. And I'm like, what? Why? Because you saw a fucking TV show on Alaska? I'm like, walk me through this. And what I would say, the call out to men is, there are so many opportunities to get involved in a boy's life. Find the single mothers in your office and say, would your kid be interested in coming to a ball game with me or coming over and just like washing my car with me? And there are just so many opportunities to add value. And you don't have to be a baller. You just have to be a dude trying to live a virtuous life.
But you don't think that would be ill-received?
God, I would hope not. Let me put it this way. You're doing your son a disservice. Mm-hmm. Boys, the data is clear. The single point of failure you can reverse engineer to when boys come off the tracks is when they lose a male role model. And look what's happening. There's not as many after-school sports programs because they're being canceled, so there's not as much male coaches, right? Young men aren't going into the office because of remote work, which is a disaster for young people. Mm-hmm. And we go back to a girlfriend. 1 in 3 men under the age of 30 is in a relationship. 2 in 3 women under the age of 30 is in a relationship. And you say, well, Scott, that's mathematically possible. It's not, because women are dating older because they want more economically and emotionally viable men. And the problem is, if a dude doesn't have a relationship, either a marriage or cohabitated with someone by the time he's 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance he's going to have a substance abuse problem. Because here's an amazing guardrail. Women have different guardrails. They have a much stronger social network outside of the romantic relationships. I'm not saying loneliness is any less of a problem for women, but it's not as harmful for them because they pour that additional energy they were pouring into a romantic relationship into their friend network and often into their professional life. Whereas boys, young men without a romantic relationship, tend to pour that additional energy into video games and porn and conspiracy theory. We are evolving a new species of asexual, asocial males. They're not attaching to work, they're not attaching to their friends, they're not attaching to a church, they're not attaching to school. And an amazing guardrail for me was my girlfriend. Mm-hmm. When I had guardrails. I went into the office of Morgan Stanley, and I had amazing guardrails. My boss used to pull me out of a meeting and go, don't say that again. Don't be such a fucking idiot.
Okay.
Or we're going to fire you and you're not going to have any money. I needed those guardrails. More than once, my girlfriend basically said in so many words, stop getting high every night or I'm going to stop having sex with you.
These are very clear statements people were saying to you. There's not like a lot of nuance.
There's a lot of nuance.
I feel like there was like.
And you know what?
Like,
that was very motivating for me.
Okay.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I really like this partnership and companionship, so I will stop getting high every night. Without guardrails, and we get guardrails from relationships, boys come off the tracks, young men come off the tracks. And when they have no social network, they have no social capital, they don't. Let me go further than this. At this conference, Peter Attia and Huberman, I've had both, Andrew Huberman, they're both these fitness neuroscientists.
Which do you like better?
I think they're both fantastic. They have declared war on alcohol. Declared war. Millennials spend $30 billion on alcohol. Gen Z, it's $2 billion. Young people aren't drinking.
He thinks they need to drink. That's where we're going, right?
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder.
Yeah, sorry.
So I think young people, my advice, what I tell young, get out, right? Get out more, drink more, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. You want to hear a ridiculously scary stat? This was so depressing to me. I saw this last week. 51% of American males between the age of 18 and 24 have never asked a woman out in person. Think about that.
Let that sit in for.
The majority of young men have never asked a woman out in person. And then they go online where there's basically like a winner-take-all environment where it's awesome to be in the top 10% of men in terms of attractiveness so you can practice Porsche polygamy and have a date every night, which, by the way, does not encourage long-term or good behavior. And then the bottom half of men are just shut out of the market. They're not going to work, they don't have a relationship, and they go down this rabbit hole where they start blaming women for their problems and become very susceptible to misogynistic content. They're less likely to believe in climate change. They're more likely to blame immigrants for their economic troubles. And some, they become really shitty citizens. And we are producing millions of them. So I think a lot about one, in high school, is the moment, we have to have a culture where the moment there is a divorce or a death, where a boy no longer has a male role model, it is the community's obligation to immediately start surrounding that boy with male influence.
I gotta stop you, because what if there are two moms?
I think that's absolutely wonderful. It's more important. Two
and
parents.
It's a dude, it's a kid, it's a boy, two moms.
Well, I'll use an example. Kara Swisher, that's her situation. She has, she's married, but she does a really good job of ensuring that there is male energy in their life.
It seems like you're one of those for her kids.
She's being generous with me. I think her
She says
brother is very involved.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with just acknowledging how important it is to have a male role model. But look, I think economics, right? I'm jumping all over the place, but I coach young men and I say, look, masculinity is a wonderful thing. Toxic and masculinity are oxymorons. There's cruelty, there's violence, there's criminal behavior. Those are the least masculine things in the world. As a man of masculinity, I'm trying to figure out how we give men a code. They don't have the military anymore. They don't have church anymore. They don't have their country in terms of values anymore, at least that they're prescribing to. Most of them aren't looking for values to religion. I'm like, could masculinity be a code? Because I think masculinity is a wonderful thing. It's like saying, you'd never say toxic femininity, because femininity is a wonderful thing, or I wouldn't say it. I think
toxic, the word, is being thrown around in a silly way. In a silly way on everything.
But three things. Provider.
Yep.
You want to be a man in this capitalist society, I'm not talking about the way the world should be, I'm talking about the way the world is. You better make money. You better be economically viable. And by the way, it might be just being, you don't need to make a lot of money, you may need to be disciplined and move to a lower cost area. You're the person that's responsible with money. But if you're a man in a capitalist society and you're not making money, you literally have no value in our society. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. And I think there's a lot of loving relationships where the woman takes lead. And sometimes being a good provider is getting the hell out of the way of your partner who's better at the whole money thing.
Right.
And being more supportive of her efforts. That's a form of masculinity and economic responsibility. You have to at least commit to trying to be a provider. 2, protector. Your default system is protection. Full stop. You may not understand transgender people. You may not even appreciate it or think that it's gone way overboard. But when you see any group being demonized, your default mechanism is protection, right? It's ridiculous we have in a society where women feel like they have to cross the street when they see men, right? Think about the most masculine jobs in the world. Someone in the military, a cop or a fire person. What are they doing? Their default system is if there's a fire on the 17th floor, my job is protection through risking my own life in the service of protecting others. Your default, someone's talking shit about anybody else, real men automatically defend that person. Anyone who feels unsafe, your default system is protection, right? That is a wonderful attribute of masculinity. And the third thing, and this is more controversial, you're a procreator. You should want to develop the skills and the attributes such that you can go out and have sex. And that maybe you're going to find the person you have sex with, you enjoy spending time with, and that person enjoys spending time with you, and then you might decide that partnering, you can create economic sustainability, and you have kids, and you're a good dad. There is nothing wrong with wanting sex. It's an amazing thing. But the first thing you got to ask yourself is, would you want to have sex with you? Right? That's my first question to men. How do you look naked?
Yeah.
How do you smell?
Yeah.
How often are you showering? Mm-hmm. You don't have to have money right now, but do you have a plan? Are you willing to endure rejection? Right? Are you trying to develop a rap, some humor? Are you putting yourself out in a position of risk? Are you willing to go up to a stranger and try and open? Right? And recognizing if he or she is not interested in you, you're both going to be fine. Mm-hmm. You're both going to be fine. Half of men haven't asked a woman out in person. Anyways, back to you.
Yeah, no. Dude, I knew how this was going to go. This is the hits. Okay, so really fun podcast when you guys mentioned masculine energy in the workplace, which our friend Mark Zuckerberg was kind enough to share that there's a need for more of it. It's a word. You just said real man. If you're a real man, which I love, because I think that's what needs to be redefined. It's not, masculine's a fine word. I'm very masculine. But is the word masculine being owned by the fuckers? The bad people are like, what is masculine energy in the workforce?
I don't think we should gender the workplace.
I know you said that, but why would they?
Why would he depress more teen girls than any person in history? I mean, I don't understand Mark Zuckerberg.
Good point. Yes, good point.
I can't get into his head.
But it feels like okay, then I'll answer my own question. I feel like it's a desire for locker room. It's a desire for not having to be PC or not having to be woke.
He was doing it, I think, in the context of justifying layoffs.
Right.
We also, let's stop the nonsense about women make better managers. Just stop gendering everything. Mm-hmm. You want to be a good person, you want to be a good leader, but I'm not sure masculine or especially feminine energy. I don't want to gender the workplace. This is what your corporations do. They're there to figure out a way for you to develop economic security for you and your family. We gave this stupid advice to young people: bring your full self to work. But I tell young people, no one should know your politics at work. Mm. And if you want to stand up and make a strident, politically correct, woke statement, people are going to applaud you and call you a leader. Memo to self, next layoff, you're gone.
Not sure, you guys. At She Media, no, you're good.
Well,
unless I don't agree with it. If I don't agree with it, then you're definitely gone.
Let me just give it to you straight. In for-profit companies, having run them, we're here to make money. We want to be good citizens. We want to pay our taxes. We want to be, but there are laws to make sure you don't act, in my opinion. But these tech leaders, in a form of virtue signaling, were saying these very kind of woke things. And then when they were asked to live up to them, they weren't interested in doing it once it cost real money. So my advice to young people is be clear, be a good person, champion people, remember you came from, mentor people, yeah. But you're there to add shareholder value. Mm-hmm. So I'm very kind of capitalist about the corporation. And don't gender it. I don't see why it needs to be more masculine or more feminine. It needs to be better at what you do, make more money, reinvest in the community, pay your taxes such that we can vote on the people who get to decide what to do with those taxes, and pass laws to ensure that people aren't sequestered from economic opportunity because of their sexual orientation or their race or their gender. And I think we've mostly done that. But I just hate the discussion around, I'm just not sure we need to masculine up, fem down, masculine up or down companies.
I think it was a code, though. It wasn't about masculine. It was about a code for I'd like to be a dick or a douchebag, and I would like for that to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I think that was the coding of nurture over here, and like we got to be tougher. It was a tougher, which I don't totally disagree with, that we need to be tougher. We are here for profit. Media's getting crushed. So yeah, we got to make tough decisions. We have to lay people off. We have to lean into stuff that's not always fun or purposeful. But I believe there was a sense there of just masculine energy being tough. Not anyway. Carrying on from there. Do you like Mark Zuckerberg?
Do I like him?
Yeah.
I just want to be equal opportunity here. I think there's few people that have made more money while doing more harm than Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah.
You want to talk about someone who weaponized femininity?
Yep.
Let's have the important debate around gender balance. Come sign my book on leaning in. Meanwhile, created a business model that made teen girls increase its self-harm. What? But she weaponized femininity? Mm-hmm. That was, in my opinion, that's no less gross than what he did. But we want to... He's the CEO, he takes ultimate responsibility, but he weaponized her femininity to come to things like this, such that we ignored the dramatic increase in self-cutting among teen girls. Mm-hmm. She's done tremendous damage to America, and he weaponized her femininity to create a heat shield, such that people didn't acknowledge that since social has gone on mobile, we've seen a dramatic increase in suicide and self-harm and eating disorders. Mm-hmm. That's our hero? Mm-hmm. Sorry.
No, not mine, but not my hero. The tech bros who are all coalescing around our new administration. I know your answer here, but I don't know that everyone else does. What is the economic model that's causing that to happen, and what's the downstream effect?
The economic model of them supporting the Trump administration? It's a kleptocracy. Right. It's pretty simple. Crypto gives $285 million to the Trump campaign, and he's decided to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve that's sending shit coins through the roof. Makes no sense, right? We have a strategic petroleum reserve in case the supply chain gets cut off and we need to make weapons or run our cars. We don't need a strategic... You can buy your own damn Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. The idea that we're going to increase the deficit because we're in deficit spending right now, such that we can buy Bitcoin and make a bunch of David Sachs' portfolio investments skyrocket in value, that's just pure kleptocracy. The fact that a guy gives $285 million to the Trump campaign and is now firing the inspectors getting in the way of his autonomous self-driving cars, that's ridiculous. America has gone, with this administration, full kleptocrat. Mm-hmm. And the sense is, what Republicans will argue is it's always been that way, Scott. It's just that you Democrats are less brazen and honest about it. And that's actually a fair point. Mm-hmm. But in America, essentially what's happened is all the shit around Doge and DEI, helicopter crashes and male versus female to get all of us progressives our hair on fire. It's all a distraction from the following. The 0.1% are about to get a tax cut that increases the deficit by $800 billion a year. And a deficit is nothing but a tax increase on young people, because at some point they're either going to have to pay it back or it's going to crowd out investments in technology or education, things that made us more prosperous. So what they do is they set our hair on fire with all these bullshit distractions, the gulf of cheaper eggs. Look over here, not the fact that we're about to increase taxes at a historic rate on future generations by giving guys like me a tax cut. And this is what's so unfortunate, is rich people and CEOs aren't speaking up because they're kind of like, they're texting saying, I hate myself for being at his inauguration and giving a million.
So
fuck you, speak up for God's sake.
Yeah, fuck you. Reid was not there. And Reid Hoffman was not there. And I feel like that should be recognized because he's a great dude. Okay, so with all that in mind, we really need news. We need journalism. We need actual information. I think journalism is being defunded. That's not news. I've heard you shout out a lot of people and I've found some cool people through your, where's Mia? Mia's a fucking dope researcher.
Mia Severio?
Yeah.
Mia, you here?
Mia, what up? Okay, anyway, I even know who your researchers are because you do tend to name people. Yep. And so that power is cool. You've led people to better sources of news. And if we muscle up, pay for it, that's something, but that's still a small business and not a national, not global coverage. It's going to be the elite probably who are actually subscribing. Is there any recommendation you have? A lot of the people who join us are publishers, they are independent, they're journalists, they're endeavoring to make a living making content, not just like well-wishing content, but
Yeah.
deep news.
I'm not here with a message of hope. It's
Yeah.
if you look at Meta,
Shocker.
if you're I know, if you're here with Meta and Alphabet, take everything I would say with a grain of salt. I'm finally rich and old enough to admit I struggle with anger and depression, which means you should take everything I say and think what could go right, because I'll tell you about what could go wrong. But essentially, Meta and Google are growing their top line revenues by, call it 15%. That's about an incremental $30 billion in growth. The media ecosystem is only growing 2 to 3% a year, which means about, I don't know, $17 to $22 billion a year is coming out of other media. So it is getting really difficult to maintain a good living in media. People say, well, how do newspapers survive? I'm like, a benign billionaire buys them and just tries not to lose too much money while supporting local journalism.
Also, 70% of them have gone out of business, so
there's that. If you're really focused and committed to media, I would say the specific crowds out the general, go super hyper specific, covering a specific beat. But I don't think I've cracked. I mean, podcasting has ended up being a really good business, but for a small number. The digitization of any category creates consolidation and becomes a winner-take-all. Because when everyone has access to everything, the flight to quality is dramatic. So there are 600,000 podcasts that put out a piece of media every week. The top 10 are responsible for a third of all downloads. I bet out of 600,000, there's only 600, that's being generous, that are self-sustaining. Now, you might get psychic income, you might use it to market a bigger company, but I did the math. I went to UCLA where I was an oarsman. 10 of us out of 2,800 oarsmen and oarswomen went to the Olympics. I had a 3 times greater likelihood of going to the Olympics than I did having a self-sustaining podcast. And that's what's happening in media. There used to be 40 companies controlled 80% of media. Now it's 6. There's just a massive consolidation.
Are any of them media companies or tech companies, or who we?
No, amongst the bigger, like the Time Warners of the world.
Oh, so we're media.
Yeah, I'm talking about traditional
So we're
media.
taking out social, yeah.
I look, at the end of the day, I don't see any way around it other than what I'll call the redistribution of income. And that is, corporations are paying their lowest taxes since 1938. I think we should have an alternative minimum tax. Any company making over $1 billion in profits should pay an alternative minimum tax of 40% a year. Because here's the thing about the tax code, is that if everybody paid their taxes without loopholes, you could actually lower rates, right? It's amazing. The tax code has gone from 400 pages to 6,000, and that 5,600 pages of incremental loopholes are basically there to fuck the middle class. I'm very transparent about my economics. I sold my last company for $160 million. First 10 million was tax-free to me. Does that make any sense? If you're a venture capitalist or a PE person and you invest in a company with less than 50 million assets and you hold the stock for 5 years, 10 times your basis is tax-free. My tax rate the last 10 years has been 17%. I am making exponentially more money now than I was in my 30s, and I'm paying about half the tax rate. Because the tax code is there to take the top 1.1% and send those people into outer space. American tax code is basically, the myth is poor people pay more taxes. They don't. If you're in the bottom half, you're paying almost no federal income tax. You pay a lot in usage and consumption tax, but you pay basically no federal income tax. What happens with taxes is the people who get screwed most by our tax code are what I call the workhorses. You and your partner make between $100,000 and $1 million a year in current income. If you're living in a blue state, which you usually do to have to make that kind of money, you're paying 35, 40, 45. Sometimes if you're in Connecticut and a baller, mom's an attorney at Skadden Arps, dad runs some chiropractic clinics, they're making $2 million a year, they're paying 51% in income tax. But if mom goes to work rolling up companies for a private equity fund, and she makes the jump to Lightspeed, and they make all of their money from investments, their tax rate plummets. So the U.S. tax code has said we're going to go progressive, especially among the workhorses, the super earners. But if you make the jump to Lightspeed and you're a super owner, your tax rate plummets. The 25 wealthiest Americans pay a tax rate of 6%.
So if we just took, we've decided we want to cram all the prosperity into the 0.1%, and the bottom 99.9 allow it because America's superpower is that we're optimists. We all believe we're better drivers. We all believe our kid is in the top 1%. And I can prove to you that 99% of our children are not in the top 1%. And so Americans think it's okay if Jeff Bezos doesn't pay any taxes because someday, just you wait and see how I'm going to treat the bottom 99 when I'm in the top 1. There's so much prosperity out there. And a long-winded way of saying, I just think we have to redistribute companies, have more antitrust, break them up, and tax them more such that they don't, and also remove things like 230. I was on Joe and me, I'm really
Just explain what
ranting now.
230 is. Explain what.
Section 230 provides as a liability shield for any nascent technology company. Basically, anything that's not traditional media. So Meta, Google are all protected by Section 230, Reddit, okay?
They're tech platforms. They're not publishing platforms. They have no accountability to.
Not old media. The new guys, the online guys, the big guys, Meta. I'm on Morning Joe, and I say, go through this whole thing on young men feeling frustrated, and I go into my rant, and I'm say, and as a result, we elected an insurrectionist and a rapist. Mika stops the show and says, just to be clear, the word you used there, he was found liable of sexual abuse. Do you know what happens every day on Meta and YouTube and Google? But traditional media has to stop and distinguish the legal language between rape and sexual abuse. If you look at what happened around Dominion and Smartmatic, the voting machines, basically Fox had to pay $750 million for distributing misinformation about Smartmatic and Dominion. That was a dumpster fire compared to the nuclear mushroom cloud that happened on Facebook. So essentially, we've created an infrastructure where these new media companies are not only better companies making more money, but they have far fewer expenses because they're not liable for any of the content they produce. If we could reverse engineer this podcast or your company or my podcast to girls cutting themselves more, we'd be out of business.
Yeah,
there'd be class action lawsuits.
If we're called She Media, we'd be fucked.
But if you're at one of these companies protected by Section 230, it's
fine.
the Wild West.
And that's only getting more so because we've decided that mediation and moderation are not really great for shareholder value over at Facebook.
It's expensive.
So anything that's expensive is not necessary. And free speech has become just so bastardized. It's very, very depressing as an excuse to do things. So I'm not going to let you off on you're creating a media company, so it's not like, it does seem like you're up to something. There's a lot of content coming out of your person. Right. You seem to enjoy doing it.
I do.
You've got a freakish cross-section of segments who follow you. It's getting weirder and weirder. It's not just middle-aged white ladies. It's like, you got everybody. I'm not going to say them all, they'll get canceled. But it's like you've got a lot of people. And probably because the truth-telling thing is cool and you do a whole bag of bullshit about your erectile dysfunction is liked. And so that all that is beloved. We're in a health space. We're normalizing things. But I feel like you have a media company. You clearly have faith that information can be protected, you're scaling, is my point.
Okay.
You are scaling, and I don't think you're just doing it for purpose, probably. There's an economic, if anyone can figure out the economic model there, you can. You care about a lot of the good journalists, maintaining the ability to do good journalism. It's expensive to do good journalism. Advertisers are going to continue to put their money often, and sorry, I'm not going to say fuck you advertisers, because we have a lot of them in the room, but they put their money with social because it is better targeting. So it would be nice if way back in the day when it was meaningful to support the content that you cared about, you have advertisers who seem to do that. Like BetterHelp's been here. They're like they are going for the talent they love. And that advertising model, at least with podcasts, does seem to be growing. There's not a good podcast answer yet that's social, YouTube, but still, you need the talent. So what are you up to? Are you going to build a trust economy of good content creators in some way with an, fuck off, come on.
My vision is not robust. I'm rounding third. I spent from 25 to 45, I did nothing but work. Mm-hmm. I don't remember anything. I wasn't trying to change the world. I wasn't trying to be a good person. I was trying to be rich. Mm-hmm. That's all I wanted. I grew up with no money. And I was very early, very focused on economics.
And that the trauma in my life, in me and my mom's life, wasn't even my dad leaving. Is we had no fucking money. You know, it was people who don't have money, or people who are born with money, they just don't know how hard it is, right? You know, I remember walking around. It was like we had a ghost following us, telling us we weren't worthy. Anyways, so I was very focused on money, and I did nothing but work for 20 or 25 years. And if you're focused on getting into the top 1% of influence or economic security, I'm not here with a message of hope. Get rid of this bullshit notion you're going to balance in your life.
But this isn't for profit. I'm not suggesting you're going to do media for profit.
I'm going there.
Get
so
there.
Now I got very lucky. And by the way, I want to recognize a lot of my luck and a lot of my wealth is not my fault. I'm not a humble person. I'm a fucking monster. I'm talented. I'm hardworking.
Yes.
But in the 80s and 90s, when I was coming of professional age, the greatest prosperity ever recognized in a Western economy was all crammed into just 1/3 of that economy, specifically straight white males. And I recognize that now. So what I'd like to do is I like to do things that I enjoy, that I think are helping out, and that I enjoy. And be clear, I love money. I still like making it. I'm still very focused on it. But my thing is young men. I think I've tapped into something. I want to be an advocate for single mothers who are struggling with their sons. I think the data is overwhelming. If you go into a morgue and there's 5 people who've died by suicide, 4 are men.
Yep.
We've lost more young men incrementally. The additional deaths of despair, drunkenness, opioid overdoses, suicide. Since 2002, we have lost more men to deaths of despair incrementally than we lost in World War II. We've lost 440,000 young men. And because of the advantage I received, we have too little empathy for a 19-year-old male. Is that fair?
Mm-mm.
So that is my quote-unquote thing. I relate to them.
Do you relate to them because you were a single mom and stuff?
I was one of them. You know how you look back and you think, these are the things that are responsible for my success. Being born in America, irrational passion for my well-being and my mother, the generosity of the University of California and California taxpayers. I also think about the things that exist today that would have gotten in the way of me being successful. You know why I wouldn't have been successful today? I couldn't have got into UCLA. When I applied, it was a 76% admissions rate. And I was one of the 24% that didn't get in. I'd applied twice. You know what the admissions rate is now? It's 9%. I got through all 7 years, undergrad and grad at Berkeley. And by the way, I got into Berkeley Graduate School with an undergraduate GPA of 2.27. But because me and my colleagues are so fucking morally corrupt now that embrace this rejectionist exclusionary strategy, we don't want to let in unremarkable kids. That's not the point of higher ed. Rich people don't need college. The whole point of higher ed is to help unremarkable kids. My mom had access to family planning. She told me at the age of 47 she was pregnant and that she was getting something called a DNC. I remember, I didn't even know what that was.
Do we know what a DNC is, ladies?
And then, like a week later, as a 17-year-old thinking about applying to UCLA, I'm like, so if she has this kid, am I going to have to go to work? Like, am I not going to college? So if we hadn't had access to family planning, I wouldn't have gone to college. I wouldn't be here now. You know what else? I probably wouldn't be here right now is if I'd had access to porn.
Gaming.
And this is very crass, but I'm trying to be raw and authentic, and that is the reason I graduated from UCLA with a 2.27. Every day I went on campus, and part of the reason I went on campus was I got a dopa hit from seeing my friends, from hanging out, and also, quite frankly, the possibility that I might meet someone who might someday have sex with me. That was very motivating for me. And if I had been at home with gambling apps and porn on my computer and my phone, I'm not sure I would have graduated from college. So there are all these things, whether it's a lack of access to affordable education, lack of access to family planning, that I just don't know if I would have gotten out of my own way as a young man. Remote work is a disaster. I would have been remote work, gambling apps, porn. I mean, I just don't think young men are prepared. I think these temptations and an addictive kind of brain, 50% of men in college are betting on the Super Bowl. TikTok, I worry we're producing a group of young people who are so used to an on-demand dopa bag that we're just going to flush into the economy, just as their brain is getting wired, that we're going to flush into the economy a group of young men who are very, very dopa hungry and are going to find unproductive means of establishing that dope. But we're supposed to wrap up. I want to end on something positive.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
The dialogue has changed dramatically. People are seeing the need to get involved in young men's lives.
What can we do? Like, what do we do? You're doing an amazing job of raising awareness. What do we do?
Red shirt boys, they should start kindergarten a year later.
100%.
Incentives for more men to get involved in primary school teaching. Mandatory national service where people can find friends, mentors, and mates and do something in the agency of America and meet kids from other economic, sexual orientation, ethnic backgrounds. If a school doesn't expand its freshman class faster than population growth, it loses its tax-free status. A tax holiday for 20 to 30-year-olds. Child tax credit, universal pre-K, a progressive tax structure. The unifying theory of everything is that every person in this room should have the economic wherewithal and the environments to potentially meet someone, fall in love, have kids, and raise a family. You may decide not to do any of those things and spend all of your additional income on St. Bart's and brunch, but for any young person in the most prosperous nation in the world not to have a pretty fairly clear blue path to raising and having a family, that means our whole system is fucked up and we need to reverse engineer to that opportunity for every young American. That is the unifying theory of everything.
Okay. All right.